Hey guys, welcome to the YouTube channel. I'm your host, Bob Barker. No, I don't know. um, just got done talking to my son. He is going to school and he's reliving my old experience from 1993. 33 years later, my son's going to college. Funny how, if I would have thought about that when I was going to school up there, that 33 years later my son would be doing the exact same thing. Yeah, it never occurs to you. And taking care of your kids is a fine balance of teaching self-sufficiency and nurturing. Because if you over nurture, right, then they don't learn how to be self-sufficient. But if you over self-sufficient and don't nurture at all, then um, then you don't create any kind of parent, child relationship. And we're all children. We're all nurturing one another and setting boundaries so we're self-sufficient and nurturing at the same time. I had this conversation with him. I was like, you know how Grandpa is. He doesn't know how to take care of himself, and so he doesn't know how to take care of anybody else. And if you really have to learn how to take care of yourself before you can ever help somebody else out who doesn't know how to do that. And everybody's at a different place. Sometimes we have, there's serious mental health issues when some children are born and they need extra nurturing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Um, Ideally, we want to be able to heal those things. And some of those things are really difficult to heal. They come down to the structure you're looking at, the structure of the vessel you're looking at. So ideally, and maybe there's parts of our higher selves that want that experience, but also want the opportunity to heal the self so that you can experience more and make life more abundant. Nobody wants to be crippled to where they can't do things that they really want to do. And that goes for everybody. So, I guess that's part of what I want to talk about today is, learning how to not over nurture, and at the same time, um, nurturing. Sometimes people need help, and if we can all, depend on each other's strengths, then we can build great things together. But that will never get rid of the fact that sometimes we want to try to learn things that maybe are difficult to learn, to challenge ourselves and unlock our potential. Um, he, uh, my brother and I were talking about the 1930s, after the Great Depression, and you see these from economic. This is big picture talking. So now we're back to big picture talking. Back in the early 30s, we got the Social Security Act, which created the U.S. citizen, and then created a new money system for this country because the old system had collapsed. Now, think about what would have happened if people just were left to design what they wanted to design for themselves. We'd have a new government by now, or within that short amount of time, you'd have a new government. And part of that Social Security Act helped fund World War II. So there's other aspects. You believe what you want. There's somebody's always usually trying to control something to because of energy and resources. So it's just controlling the mind to make sure that the mind is doing what somebody else wants it to do, so that it can meet its own ends, because it still doesn't really know who it is and what it is, and we unconsciously harm ourselves all the time. I made a comment on a good friend of mine's post. She's a coach, and she was talking about the Bible and things, and I said, so I made a comment. I said, the Bible is just a book that really is a witness for the rules of the heart. And so follow your heart and see where it takes you. And you'll know the rules without needing a book to tell you. And she responded saying, I totally agree, but following your heart could lead to, bad decisions. And then I responded and said, are there any bad decisions? Because you're learning from every decision you make. And if it harms you, it will. And if it If it doesn't harm you, then, you know, it's, you're freeing yourself from pain. So I don't think there's any bad decision. I mean, when people go to war, they found out in a real short amount of time that it's not good for their mental health, their physical, their psychological health, when you're actively at war with yourself. If you see, look out there and you see it as different from you, then you'll be at war with yourself. And you don't want to be at war with yourself. You want to heal yourself of everything, of any abnormality of the mind, your body, your soul. And so that is the most, I think that's one of the highest potentials that we can reach, is just the ability to not control and do what we're asked. Because, you know, you're not really meeting a need unless you're doing what you're asked. If you're trying to, you know, sell something that someone doesn't, you don't necessarily know what they need, let them ask for it first. And so during the 30s, it moved into communities trying to help each other out, to try and figure out, you know, how they could, things become more localized, because you no longer have a national economic currency that's doing anything for you after the crash of 29. And so it took 4 years before 1933 and the Social Security Act, and they came and confiscated the gold. But problem, reaction, solution, right? Create a problem, then you create a solution that it creates the same problem over again. But you just push the ball down the road. You don't really fix the problem until you move away from the old system, because the old structure always has the same ending. So why do we keep recreating the same structure where you have centralization that's feeding off the population to provide them something that they don't need, which is security? Because we're all immortal. Why would I feel the need to make somebody else to make me feel safe? Why? I mean, that's the fear of death is all wrapped up in any form of bondage. Every form of bondage can be traced back to the fear of death, because you're afraid if you don't control that thing out there, it's going to kill you. And that's true. So it's the deep spiritual truths around fear of death and debt. Because why would you hold anybody else, if they aren't afraid of dying, why would you hold them in debt in any way for not understanding that that was the thing that was holding them back? Because most people don't, most of the things you look at in this reality doesn't know what it is relative to your place in space-time. Maybe at some level it does, if you look deep enough, because it's moving so fast close to the heart. It probably has a pretty good idea what it is. But when it's moving slowly and it's not, you know, it doesn't understand what it is, then it makes decisions based on that lack of knowledge. You know, if it's attached to anything temporary. And none of us are temporary. We're all permanently here. Yeah. Philosophically speaking. And from a physics standpoint, it's really interesting, because think of it this way for you guys. Maybe this might be a little bit of a mind trip, but if you were to look at something solid and it was completely solid and not moving, how would you interact with it? It's not moving. It's not a part of you. So how could you interact with something that wasn't interacting with you? Because it's stationary. It's not interacting with anything. So it technically doesn't even exist. That's why this reality looks and acts the way it does. The closer you look, the faster it moves. It's just relative in space. It's just you relative to yourself in space and time. And if it doesn't understand that, it creates based on its own understanding. Everything according to its own understanding. And our understanding continues to grow. So I hope this was entertaining for you as well as for me. Love you guys. Have a great day. just something to think about. You know, raising kids with care is tough because most of us have a tendency to be either over nurturing or overly self-sufficient. You know, to teach too much over self-sufficiency. And that was the major message I was trying to help today, is that, you know, you can nurture and still nurture self-sufficiency. And as a parent, I have to make sure that I'm not going out of my way to try and make things too easy on my son. Make sure he's doing the things for himself, and he's a pretty good kid. He doesn't need to eat much. He's not a pig. He doesn't. He's not a glutton. He doesn't. So his food bills is about as small as he wants it to be, which is actually really good. You know, to manage yourself. He doesn't eat unless he's hungry, and he eats generally less than I do when I make dinner. And it's just from old family habits of, you know, you eat everything in front of you. He doesn't. I can throw a bunch of stuff on a plate, and he'll just eat what he wants, what makes him filled up, and then he won't touch the rest. Which, growing up, that would never happen in the household I was growing up in. I don't know about the rest of you. Um, but yeah, it would be really easy for me to show up there every weekend and bring him all this stuff and show him, you know, and maybe I'll do that every once in a while, but make sure that I already know he's taking care of himself and he's organized. So that's another blessing. So anyway, I'll quit talking about it. Anyway, love you guys. Oh, it doesn't matter what state your kids are in, they're a blessing to you because they would help you understand yourself better. Have a great day.